and welcome to Women's Hour. Here I am, Helen and joining me today, which is a bit of a surprise,
Pat Taylor.
Yay.
Hello, good afternoon.
Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a special episode today because we want to talk about diabetes. So this programme is obviously nice and streaming live now, but equally it's a really good thing to save and play back because some of the things we're going to talk about are based on a bit of science, but also a lived experience of somebody with type 1 diabetes.
If you want to join in the conversation, as always, call us on 01872 22 8844 or email on hello@thisischaos.co.uk.
And the way this is going to happen today, Pat's going to ask me questions. We've got a couple of slides that we want to show you as well for your reference, but it's to really drill home the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
So I'm going to kick off. So this is Diabetes Week, which is in June, and we're raising awareness on diabetes in the UK. And so we're going to talk today, firstly, about the two different types of diabetes. So first of all, we're going to talk about type 2 diabetes. So tell us what most people think of when type 2 is mentioned, and you've had a lot of experience of this, haven't you?
Oh, don't get me going. So my opinions are my own. Well, just be clear about that, just in case I do manage to climb up onto a soapbox and have the rage. Type 2, if you eat chocolate or a bit fat, you're a type 2 diabetic. That is not the truth. So there are lots of misconceptions around diabetes. For a start, it needs to be classified. We need to understand type 2 is not type 1. And there's a really strong reason behind that. Type 2 is often can be reversed or reduced in terms of the symptoms. Type 2 is often, and I'm saying like these words of my own, type 2 is often related to lifestyle and age. I say it's often. There are lots of issues and loose things around it because actually there's a lot more than two types of diabetes. But the two big ones that we're talking about today is type 1 and type 2.
So I'll give you some stats and some information. So the type 2 diabetes really is a condition which develops if your body can no longer respond effectively enough to its own insulin to prevent your blood glucose levels from going too high. And it affects 4.9 million people in the UK, with 90% of those having type 2. So that's quite a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big old pot of people that are dealing with it, and not many people are living with it and they haven't actually been diagnosed, which is why it's really important to talk about the symptoms later.
And what are the risk factors then? So we know that some of the risk factors include age, and if your family have had it before?
Yeah, there's a huge part of type 1 and type 2 is connected to the genetic footprint. So if there is type 1 in the family, that does increase risks of also becoming type 1 yourself. If there's type 2, again, I think there's also not just the genetic thing, but it's the lifestyle thing that needs to be factored in.
And there's quite a list as well. So ethnicity, GPs look at your high blood pressure or your blood pressures to see if it's high, because there's a correlation there. Alcohol, smoking, poor sleep, and a sedentary lifestyle as well. And I think that all goes into the wellness pot, doesn't it, really?
Yeah.
So if you can keep yourself well.
So it's not a gimme that if you're older that you will become diabetic, but essentially the body needs looking after, and that's why I think we come back to, and this is why us, the stuff we talk about is around the whole person. So the whole person is important. We're not just looking at one part, and let's have a look at I really want to spend a bit of time around self-care and what you can do to reduce your symptoms of becoming pre-diabetic and then diabetic, but also actually look at aging greatly and what the issues aging has with the connection with diabetes.
And there's another factor as well, which is a big one. It's obesity, and it can be a vicious circle, can't it? Because if you suffer from obesity, it's really hard to move, to eat well, you get really kind of demotivated, and then you might find out that you're type 2.
Yeah.
And it can be, you need a lot of support, don't you?
Well,
I think it's really misunderstood.
I think there's a lot of shame
Mm.
that is in. I'm not going to say enforce, it's not the right word, but many people who are battling with weight, there are a gazillion reasons why they have weight issues. There might be other things going on, and we're going to tap into in a little while around the autoimmune conditions and your endocrine system. That already sounds a bit sciencey, but look at things like polycystic ovary syndrome. Some women will have that, and that is an autoimmune condition. It really plays havoc with your metabolic system, and typically a female will be obese, and the next side effect would be to develop type 2 diabetes, and it's just a real vicious circle. So there is some real empathy that I think we as a nation need to improve on around diabetics, both 1 and 2, and I think we need to have a better understanding around our whole system approach to our health and well-being, so not as many in the future become diabetic.
And it's more common when you're over 40, isn't it? And it can creep up on you. So there might be just little niggles, we call them, don't we? So there might be something that you're not sure about, or you don't feel quite right, or you might be thirsty, or
hey, you
etc.
don't. That's
Is that
the
later?
slide coming up.
All right, I won't go there. But things can creep up on you, and you kind of feel a bit unwell, and you're not sure. You can't put your finger on it. And so it's really important to be self-aware, isn't it? And we really advocate that, being self-aware, writing things down and knowing your body, becoming your own best expert.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, shall we move on?
Yeah.
Before we move on,
Yeah.
we've got some questions
Oh, okay.
that have
Ooh,
come up.
already.
So, this is from Lisa in Mollier, and she says, how are you supposed to know if you're pre-diabetic?
Okay, so with pre-diabetes, that will be defined by a blood test. They'll have a look at what we call your HbA1c. It's a blood test to have a look at your overall blood sugars. Now, your blood sugar count, that sounds really complicated, but a simple pinprick, just so we get a little drop of blood, will give us an idea of what the long-term sugar is in your body. Pre-diabetes is also linked to menopause. It may be linked to the hip-waist ratio. So if you are wider around the middle, and maybe inactive, maybe the diet's not particularly great, may all be that precursor to pre-diabetes. The bottom line is, if you think you need to be more healthy, that is hopefully an emotional trigger for you to start being more healthy, to move more and sit less. Hope that helps.
It does help. There's another question.
Okay.
Should we do the question next before we move on to the slide?
Okay.
So Chloe in Lisgard asks, if people with diabetes are not more likely to get ill than someone without it, why do they get prioritised for things like flu jabs and COVID jabs?
Okay.
It seems unfair.
Oh, no. So type 1 and type 2 it comes under the classification of a chronic health condition. So if somebody is living with type 2, firstly, there's a shame thing here around that's not fair. They've got type 2 diabetes. They don't deserve it because they've asked to have type 2. I think we need to reframe that narrative, because we don't know people's stories. We don't know how that has happened. Equally, we have this habit of banging type 1 and type 2 into the same pot, but again, there's very different clinical responses to type 1 and type 2. The other thing is, we do need to protect people with chronic health conditions. So a cold to somebody with diabetes, a cold to somebody who is generally healthy can often be exacerbated to somebody who has a chronic health condition, because if you think they're just slightly their health is slightly diminished, so they don't have all that fight going on in their bodies. So, and we will talk about my daughter in a minute, but a sniffle to somebody would be flu to her, and then that will knock her out for days, weeks, months. So it is really, really important that we do put that support around people with living with chronic health conditions, including diabetes. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Shall we go to our first slide?
Oh yeah. So we got a slide coming up, and this is around symptoms because, and I will talk about my daughter. She was one of those lovely bonny children that had a little bit of puppy fat, and she was just bonny but active and lovely, and we didn't see it coming. So Maddie is type 1 diabetic. She's now 21. She's a hairdresser, hairstylist, and she's flipping fabulous. But when she became symptomatic, around our house, we used to have an American style fridge freezer with ice chips. And around our house, we had cups everywhere with teaspoons where she was constantly eating ice. And we just thought that was her thing. We didn't realise how thirsty she was. So one of the symptoms is absolute thirst, and unquenchable thirst as well. Peeing yourself, it is not unusual for somebody to possibly not make the loo in time, so have a little bit of stress incontinence. That's what we will assume, or even wee themselves in bed as an adult. Exhaustion, fatigue. They may have lost weight, and people will do this. Oh my God, you look fantastic! You lost weight, because we celebrate weight loss in this country. And again, it might be because there's something else going on. Repeated thrush recurrences, so you going back and forth to the chemist and getting treatment for thrush. That is indicative of high sugars in your body. Your vision is affected. Things like cuts, you don't heal when you've got high sugars in your body. You don't heal so well, and even your breath smells a bit funny. One or two of these symptoms you can kind of ignore or just palm it off to something else. You've had late nights, or you've had a headache, so you got blurry vision. But collectively, it starts to build a real picture. If you go to your GP with maybe 4 of these symptoms, the first thing they should do is test your blood sugars and identify what number they are, and we will come back to numbers in a little while. Does that help? I'm hoping symptoms are quite useful.
They are very useful. Thank you for that. So, shall we move on and talk about your daughter? So,
my
your
baby.
Wonderful Maddie, who is a complete rock star.
She is an utter rock star on many levels, because she is funny and she is hilarious, isn't she? But she's talented. She's got a really good karma around her, and she has to deal with her chronic health condition, which is living with type 1 diabetes. And we're a robust, healthy family, so let's just go back in time, shall we?
Yeah.
I've always been a bit of a nutter when it comes to health and well-being, and that's what my family would describe me as. And I don't know if you know this, but heart disease starts in childhood. And I'll give you an example. A mum says, I don't eat crisps, but I feed it to my kids and they've got a crisp cupboard and a sweetie cupboard. Why? Why? Why do you do that? What we do around processed food is completely bonkers. Yeah. So in our house, we never really had a crisp and chocolate cupboard. We didn't do it because I was that personal trainer. Don't judge me. Again, we're talking about shame and judgment, but don't judge me. But I did have a very clear objective. It's like we all ate well and we all had treats, but we didn't have a cupboard stored with crisps and chips and whatnot. Anyway, we go on a little round robin around the UK visiting family and friends. She's sleeping a lot. She's 8. I'd even noticed that she'd wet her knickers, and she's okay about me having this conversation. And then I went away for a weekend training, and my husband, and there are a lot of husbands out there or partners out there, who's a bit of a he just buried his head in the sand and just didn't really listen to what was going on. We thought she had, we'd been told by our GP that she had a virus.
Yeah.
And I knew a little bit of knowledge. I was just palmed off. And I kept going back to the doctor. And then my connection was the doctor kept giving her antibiotics. She kept having thrush. So do you remember what I said about symptoms? Thrush is one of the symptoms. So, and I'm saying, well, she's got thrush. And the GP's saying, Mum, you're just being a bit fussy. She's had a course of antibiotics. So, and often many people will have thrush-like symptoms after they've been on antibiotics. It got so bad, she got so unwell, and she really had all those symptoms that we talked about earlier on. And it got to the point where my husband sent my 9-year-old across 2 major roads to go to the shop to get milk because Maddie was too unwell to move. And at that point, the alarm bells are going off. Been talking to the doctors for the out of hours doctors for about 3 or 4 days, and they just kept palming us off. By the time my husband got her down to Penzance in Cornwall, she was already slipping into a coma. There were no ambulances available that day to support her, and they basically said, we will phone ahead via the 999 emergency service, put your hazards on and drive as fast as you can from Penzance to Truro, and we'll be waiting. And by the time my husband got to Truro, she was now in a coma. And my 9-year-old was there with my 8-year-old, who's now in my husband's arms, and I'm in upcountry training, and then that's it. She's now in the hands of the NHS. So at this point, she's on a driver, an insulin driver. They knew straight away that she had diabetes. Normally what happens is that if you get diagnosed with diabetes, you may go into hospital. Not everybody does, but as soon as you're on insulin, you feel well again. However, Maddie, she was really unwell, and we went through 12 days in hospital and a whole bunch of complications around her diabetic care, which was just horrendous. So I'm talking about it in a really sort of information sharing kind of way. But it's hard.
So my next question is, talk to us about the impact it has had on your family and what it looks like now. Now she's a lot older, but when she was little, and what impact did it have?
Those who know us know how much that we love the NHS as a business, as individuals. You're our nurse. We love the NHS, but sometimes language has got a lot to play. So you're constantly in battle when you have type 1 diabetes, and the conversation is all about getting your blood sugars down. So on a scale of everybody has a pancreas, a functioning pancreas produces insulin, except for diabetics. So you have to take on type 1s in particular. Some type 2s have insulin, but mostly it's type 1s, and you have to, it's this constant gameplay. So everything you eat, there is a carbohydrate response to it, so you have to take insulin. So every mealtime since she was 8, the conversation has been about how many carbs is in that, have you taken your insulin, have you taken your other medicine that sits around it, because it's not just insulin. But it does change the narrative of all meal times, not to mention hospital appointments, clinics, which is constant until you're 16. And then in Cornwall, there is no transition service to adulthood. So for 2 years, she had no support at all whatsoever, no relationship with the GP. It's very difficult living with type 1. And trust me, I've heard things like, well, at least it's not cancer. She's like, really nice, thanks for that support. And we hear that a lot. As a family, you've got to think about mental health, because when you're a kid, you just want to be normal, whatever that looks like. But it's really hard when you are constantly told could do better, could do better, could do better, because you're constantly trying to work on getting your sugars to a balanced level that you can be normal, because too high, it will kill you long term. If your sugar's too low, that can also kill you, but quite quickly. So, you know, it's a constant battle. So every day, every morsel that goes into her mouth, every time she injects insulin, it is all about trying to keep alive today.
And this is a lifelong condition at the moment, isn't it? So it's not something that's just going to go away.
Yeah,
and I think that's kind of quite a struggle as well, isn't it?
It's coming to terms with the fact that it's something that you do have to live with for the rest of your life. And when you look at her, she's a rock star. She's, you know, she's cool. She does it. It's discreet. But, you know, it's not easy. It is not easy. And it doesn't help the fact that you got me as a mother who understands the long-term benefits of your health if you don't look after it.
So let's talk about Maddie, how she feels and her lifestyle.
So she's a 21-year-old normal, whatever that looks like, hairstylist. She goes out, she drinks with her mates, she goes out in the sun. She has quite, you know, working as a hairstylist, it can be quite stressful. So her lifestyle could be better. Even I'm saying could be better. Having said that, that's what she's told about a lot. She just wants to be normal, and it's quite a challenge. What is really refreshing though these days, you have a blood glucose monitor, which is this white thing that you've got on your arm. You may have seen Theresa May, our former Prime Minister, wearing one, and that it gives a constant feedback loop on what. Oh, here we go. There's a slide coming up of some other type 1s that we put together, including Halle Berry, who's definitely one of my sheroes. And I can't remember the model, but I think she's Kate Moss's daughter, isn't she? She's type 1 and she wears a pump and her blood glucose monitor. So the nice thing is you see people out and about wearing a blood glucose monitor and you're like, oh,
I get you.
And I want to connect with them and go, oh, my daughter's got one of those.
Yeah.
But it's so important to own it. And I think that is often the challenge, because I think for such a long time it's complicated. People freak out. They ask questions like, does it hurt? You know, when you're trying to inject yourself, it's like, she doesn't have a choice. You know, it's not like she can't take a medicine. She has to take the insulin to stay alive every day, and she has to inject insulin multiple times a day. That for anyone is a challenge, and our young adults in this country need way better support.
Yeah, and I think Maddie, I know Maddie quite well, and she's lucky that a lot of her friends understand, don't they? And she has that support. So if somebody was a parent at home and their daughter or son was just diagnosed as a teenager, what would be kind of your suggestion? So like Maddie's at work, isn't she, and needs regular breaks and things. So what would you say would really help them? I
think to know that you got their back. They've got to be adults. They've, you know, I mean, they have to grow up really quickly.
And you've been sacked, haven't you? You've been sacked as a mother from her appointments.
Oh yeah, she's totally divorced me. And it's because I am mum, and since she was 8, I have been in charge of the medicine and picking up prescriptions, adjusting and doing it all for her. At some point she's got to do it on her own, because I'm not going to be around her as she sort of matures into life. I think it's just making sure you got the right education around you, because you get some right so-and-sos who say the most dumbest things to you, and and I'm a very passive person, but sometimes I just want to punch them on the nose, honestly.
Yeah, well, my next question was, how do you manage as a mum with a diabetic teenager or adult, apart from punching people on the nose? You've got to be quite diplomatic, haven't you, I suppose?
Oh, it's a nightmare, because everything comes back to food, and it's food, and that's the worst thing. It's not just food. No, honestly. So the good thing about diabetes, that 2 or 3 days before she actually gets sick with, I don't know, cold, cough, or, you know, she's got an infection or whatever it is, the blood sugars will tell the story 2 or 3 days beforehand, and she'll be perfectly well, except the blood sugars will tell a different story. And then we have to go, what's going on? And in terms of things like cycles, periods. It has stress. Here we go. Stress and diabetes, nightmare. So it is a constant nightmare. So I've always joked that Maddie is like living with the diabetic seven dwarfs. So when she's a hypo, she can be confused. We call that Space Cadet Maddie, and she just bounces around the house, and we need to activate a response, a medical response to her hypo, because maybe we should talk about hypos and hypos.
And some,
And then also she's got the sleepy one or the sweaty one or the angry one. So her body is telling her that it needs sugar and she will react accordingly. But you just don't know which type of behaviours, which one of the dwarfs we're going to get. Equally, on the other side of the spectrum, when they're high, sometimes they can be sick, but they certainly can be angry. Hormonal teenagers, which is just lovely. It's just lovely.
So shall we talk about hypos, hypers, and ketones?
Yes,
because that's absolutely so important. Ketones, aren't they?
So when people are starting to become diabetic, so here's an interesting thing. Type 1 used to be juvenile onset diabetes. That's what it used to be called. But actually today we're seeing more and more adults becoming type 1 diabetics, and I'm not quite sure the story behind it. I believe there's a lot of stress-induced autoimmune responses. So Maddie, I'm pretty sure, and actually quite a few of our friends who have children with type 1 have all talked about a trauma that happened maybe a couple of months prior to them becoming type 1. So Maddie lost her granny, who was like the light of her life. Our friends, they lost both their grandparents, and both boys became type 1 within a short period of time. So you don't know, but stress has got a lot to do with it. So what happens is your blood sugars get higher and higher and higher before you're diagnosed, and eventually you get to a point when you have all those symptoms that we brought up earlier on, and then what then happens is that you get this build-up of ketones in your body, and the ketones are high acidic and they kill you. Ultimately they kill you. So people do die of diabetes because they've got a build-up of high sugar, and but equally that can fry you from the inside out. So which is why a lot of diabetics, many as they get older, foot care is really important because they get neuropathy, because high sugar in your body affects your hands, like your peripheral, your toes, feet, your ability to heal is affected by ketones. So hyper, your blood sugars are high, which means in normal humans, your blood sugars, when you test, sit between the number 4 and number 7. That's fine because our pancreas does it all for us. We don't need to do anything about it. But actually, for those who have to manage insulin, they have to try and get the blood sugars constantly between 4 and 7. Under 4, you're in hypoglycemic state, which now is a medical emergency, and that is treated often with food, and that is a fast acting carbohydrate such as orange juice, and then so that shoots up your blood sugars, and then you have a slow acting carbohydrate like a bit of toast, banana, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, oh my god, and that, or cereal, just nice carbohydrate that will catch the high and just take it forward, so we get this slow increase of blood sugars in the body. So the Coke thing and the chocolate thing, yes, if you're having a hypoglycemic emergency, full fat Coke will get your sugars up really, really quick. Chocolate, not so much, because it's slow, because it's got milk in it and fats. So it's about how you digest and metabolize. So you have to get them quickly up. When they're really, really ill in a hypo, we have glucagon, like an injection pen, which thankfully we've never had to use in our house.
Glucose tablets, they sometimes
glucose
use
tablets.
in,
Oh, we love a glucose tablet in our house. Great for energy.
So what does Maddie's future look like?
As a person, well, healthy, hopefully. Oh, I can't wait to be a grandparent.
No,
Honestly,
babies.
I can't wait. Babies, not wishing their lives
No,
away.
no, but
But also in the future, I genuinely want to believe that there will be a cure in her lifetime.
yeah.
Maybe not mine. I think we're getting closer.
Yeah.
They're talking about pancreatic transplants. The technology in terms of insulin pumps is so much more advanced now. And I think that's just, it's come on such a long way. So in her lifetime, I think, and I'm hoping that people will have a bit more empathy around the autoimmune conditions. She is affected by other autoimmune conditions, because often what happens is there's a likelihood, because her body is turned on itself and given a type 1 that celiac, she gets screened for gluten and wheat intolerances, because there's a real connection between celiac and type 1. Other hormonal issues, thyroid, which she has that checked, and she has her ovaries checked as well to make sure that they're functioning well too. But I want a healthy, well supported self-care future for all type 1s, everyone actually, but including my little rock star.
Should we go to the next slides and we
Yeah.
can talk about self-care and what we can do to help ourselves?
Well, I thought we could share this conversation
Yeah.
because this slide talks about self-care for diabetes, but actually it's really for life.
Yeah.
So I think there's a real big piece here that we have got to take ownership for our health as a nation. We are ultimately reliable. We rely on the NHS and our health service to pick up the pieces, but actually we could do more. Cost of living right now is really stressful. You can understand for many why the nutrition isn't great at the moment, but I think there are some fundamental things that we need to go back to do, like batch cooking.
Oh,
we love a bulk
we
cook.
do.
Just try and manage your food in your house a bit better, but eat a wide range, and that includes the stuff you can pull out the ground or pull off a tree. It's really important to eat well and healthy. I know it's expensive, but it is about yourself for the rest of your life. Keep the sugars and the fats and the salts to a minimum, mostly the sugars. And that is when when we're talking about white pasta, God bless it, we eat it in abundance, don't we?
Yeah.
Processed food we eat in abundance. We just got to keep it down. And here's a big one, particularly the type 2s. Don't skip your meals. Be regular and consistent about the food, and ultimately move more and sit less. If we're more active, so it's not a chore, it is part of our daily maintenance. So to get up in the morning, have a wee, have a poo, move your body, exercise and eat well, that is maintenance. That is looking after your health for life. Do you want to add to that?
Just that, when you eat sugar and you want to eat more sugar, don't you? That's me. You eat sugar and you just want more sugar and more sugar. And so that's another reason to reduce it, isn't it? To really monitor and eating those healthy sugar.
So right. Well, what I was going to say, I know, because that's it. Because when we start on the chocolate caterpillar cake, then we've had it, haven't we?
We have.
But here's the thing: it's called the sugar hijack. So in your brain, I'm not going to do all the sciencey stuff.
No.
But when you eat sugar, what it does, it hijacks your brain, and your brain gets that real high fix, as if say, oh my God, that's the best thing I've ever tasted, which we probably do, especially, we're guilty this morning. We both had a bit of Colin the caterpillar
cupcake because it was her birthday
Absolutely.
yesterday.
And but with that, the next thing is your brain goes, I want that kick again. I need another high like that. I want more chocolate, or I want more sweeties. And it will set off signs in your body to crave more carbs. So the more carbohydrates are sugar. Things like fructose, glucose, maltose, galactose. It's
all the O's.
All the O's. It's all sugar, and it hijacks your brain. So it's really important that we just reduce the volume. And do you know what? It sounds overwhelming. Me and you, we talk about change one thing. Don't be overwhelmed about trying to improve your health. If you know it's water, drink more water.
I was
You
going
know.
to talk about water.
Oh, were you?
But I'll tell you a tip that I do. Because I love sugar, I love a bit of chocolate, and I love bread. But I know if I start my day with bread, I'll want bread
You've had
all
it.
day, and
Yeah.
I'll want sugar all day.
Yeah.
So if I do have sugar in the day, I'll eat some protein as well, because then that'll make me feel fuller.
Yeah.
And I think it counteracts your sugar levels. But also, I'll have a bit of sugar at night, and then I'll go to bed feeling a bit smug that I won't actually eat any more sugar that day because I'll be in bed. That's my little top tip.
What, to eat sugar before you go to
No,
bed?
make sure you clean your teeth. I've got to go to the dentist later, so no, don't eat sugar unless
And
you clean
here's
your
the
teeth.
thing, that's the other thing with type 1s, you've got to look after your teeth, because the sugar, because you live with high sugar in your body and it affects your teeth, and a direct route to your heart is via your teeth, so you've got to look after the connection, because there are long-term implications of high blood sugars, both with type 1 and type 2, and it's really important. So this is why we did a special program today about it, because it's not just the diagnosis, because you can actually stop becoming type 2, or you can actually reverse your symptoms. You can, with type 2 diabetes, come off insulin, you can come off metformin, you can certainly reduce some of your medication that you're taking to support your type 2. You can reduce the quantity of insulin that you're taking on board in your body with type 1 if you do the self-care and regulate what you eat, move more, have a well-balanced life, because too much of everything is not good for you, hey?
Shame. I just want to tell you a little story about, for those of you that might have to care for somebody or look out for somebody with diabetes, is when I was nursing in Trelisk, I had a farmer come in and he had an awful sore on his foot. And it was because he'd worn the same boots for work over and over for weeks, months, a couple of years maybe, and he had something in his boot. I don't know if it was a nail or something sticking through. And because he couldn't feel his feet, he had this sore in his foot, and it meant that he had to have a drastic surgery on that foot, and he couldn't feel it. And that the same happens with fingers and toes sometimes. It's not with every case with diabetes, but that is one of the complications Helen mentioned earlier about peripheral neuropathy. And that means that because of your circulation, you lose the feeling in some of your fingers, toes. If you're jabbing your fingers constantly in the wrong place, you need to do your blood test at the sides of your fingers, not on the pads, because that's where your nerve endings are less. So, you can be really susceptible to all sorts of different things going on. So we're always a bit cautious when cutting toenails, fingernails. So it might be better to get an expert to do those. And so if you're caring for somebody or you know somebody with diabetes, just keep an eye on them. We'll get them to make sure they're ticking it off and look at the skin, etc., and look at that body to make sure that they're okay.
All right, Nursey, we don't want to scare them all.
No, but it's just simple things.
It's about raising awareness. Well, let's to add to the voice of doom, we'll bring up this final slide, and this is about the whole of you. So reinforcing the message, type 2 has for such a long time had a bit of a bad rep, but we have to look after the health, the whole long-term health, because otherwise, we're dealing with eye problems. You can lose your sight, and literally overnight. And I kid you not, it does happen with type 1 and 2. You can lose limbs as a result of poor sugar management. Your heart is affected. You could have a stroke. You can get kidney problems. You'll be on dialysis, nerve damage around your body, so you're incapable of healing. Gum disease and other related conditions, some of the lifestyle cancers. So it is really important, and I know we sound like the voice of doom, but let's just go back to that self-care slide. So you can help yourself. You can really look after your well-being if you eat more, sit less, and just really sort of understand how important it is. You've got one body, and you really got to look after that one body.
So we're coming to a close now. I think we've got a couple of minutes left. So join us again on July the 19th. And you can always go to our Facebook page. And we just need to ask you a favour. Can you please vote for us? We are in the Business Cornwall Awards, and we're off to see Ben Fogle. Oh, I love Ben Fogle, don't you?
Oh, well, I'm
Next
a loose
Thursday.
cannon. You know what I'm
Yeah,
like.
I'll
I'm
have
like
to make her behave.
bottom pinching somewhere.
So follow us at www.icareimove.com and support us. Give us a little...
No, I think what we'll do, we'll put up the link on our Facebook pages, and if you can, just click through. It's a really simple thing. Click through and say, yes, we love these people, and hopefully we'll get nominated. Well, we are nominated for the People's Choice Awards.
Yeah, we're off
so
to a
it's very
posh do. So
exciting.
we've got Black Tie Awards, Black Tie do. We've got to get dolled up, having our hair done,
We're getting our
aren't we?
hair down. We've got sparkles. It's just going to be a really exciting night. And actually, we're just going to spend the night enjoying
We are.
and celebrating how far iCareIMove has gone as a business over the last few years.
Any wise words to finish up?
I just think, in terms of your health, you've got one body, you've got to look after it. I turned 51 yesterday and I feel fabulous. So I'm just thinking about my next 25 years, what's that going to look like? And I'm optimizing my health now. You've got one body, look after it, because honestly, without that, what have you got, guys? So it's so important. Look after yourself. Just do a couple of things now to improve your life, because the older version of you will one day reflect back and go, thanks, mate.
And yeah, get out and enjoy our beautiful scenery, our beautiful environment. There's so many walks that you can go on, and just moving your body can really help as well. So get out, be sociable, get some vitamin D in the sunshine. It's really good for you. Hydrate, always in the sunshine. Hydrate, drink lots of fluid, lots of water, and yeah, be well. Be well. We've got 1 minute left.
Oh, we've got 1 minute. Right, okay, I understand. I'm like, what? Why is she talking like that? Listen, get in touch with us. And don't forget, we've got a Menopause Muse group, which is on Facebook. And we've got about 1,600 women in that group right now. So we'd love to see you. We'd love to talk to you. Always happy to share information. And it's not just about sharing the information, but hopefully give you something that may change your life. Look after yourselves.
Take care.